YouTube, what's going on? What's good? Your host here, Joseph Ausmus with eXp Realty, host of Ask a Realtor on YouTube Live, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. It's 7:52 p.m. right now. That's why I'm tapping my wrist. I'm a little late to the game today, but didn't want to leave you guys high and dry. So we're going to talk about something super awesome, which is paint. And reason I bring this up, I've had, a good buddy of mine just had his house painted by a professional. Turned out bomb, amazing. They did a lot of the good prep work there. But if you wanted to paint your own house, interior or exterior, um, and you go to the hardware store, you can be overwhelmed by all the different types of paint that you see. Let alone all the colors, right? And they can mix down the color for you. But prior to them mixing that color, like all the different bases, all the, what exactly do you need, right? And how do you know what's good quality and what's poor besides the price tag? Because that can be an indicator of quality, but it's not always the case. So I found an excellent blog post that I shared on my Facebook business page. I have it posted up there for all to see. I'll actually drop the link for it in the chat here because I'm cool like that. Let's pull that up here. And if you're watching live, feel free to chat with me in the chat box here. Ask questions about this topic, ask questions about something else. And yeah, we want this to be conversational and, as two-way as possible. And if you're watching it later, all these are recorded. You can go back and watch them later. You can leave comments on them after the fact, even when we are no longer live. And that will, cue me into what you want to learn about, and we can chat about that on future Ask a Realtor sessions. Boom. So first thing you got to do is subscribe to the channel. It'll notify you when we do go live, so that if you forget that it's Wednesday at 6 and you're cooking dinner, whatever, boom, it pops up. You can pop it open on your phone and listen in. So cool. Let's go ahead and get started here. So I really liked the way this was written from someone in the industry. This gentleman, I believe, yeah, he has been painting. He was a house painter in the good old USSR in the 1970s. So, and they were making their own paint. So I thought that was fascinating. But this guy, let's see here. I just had his name. Yeah, and I may butcher this. Yefim Skomarovsky. He is with Classic Shades Painting Company, Inc., out of San Francisco, California. So giving you a shout out there, Mr. Yefim. Great blog post, great article. I am going to lean on this one heavily for our topic today because you obviously know your stuff, having made your own paint and then written this blog post for me to educate, you party people about. So primary function of architectural coating is to protect metals, wood, and other materials against corrosion and decay. We're protecting against the elements, water, wind, sun. In particular, ultraviolet rays are a big destroyer of paint, and especially with respect to pigment, the shade, the coloring. You've seen it on a side of a building that had old paint, where it gets really faded out, especially on that side that's getting it's getting blasted by like that western or southwestern exposure in the evenings, right? And it gets blasted day in and day out, and yeah, it'll wear out over time. So yeah, paint is there, obviously aesthetics, pleasing to the eye, but it serves a functional purpose too, to protect your home. So, where house painting is concerned, one of the prime objectives is to ensure that paint remains bonded to its substrate. That's what it's applied to, and that it retains its essential properties for as long as possible. Selection of the right paint material is absolutely crucial in achieving this objective. So, let's see here. So, what's in that bucket of paint? Your four basic paint ingredients are pigments, binders, additives, and solvents. So let's define each one of those. Solvents are also known as vehicles. These are quick to evaporate liquids. So in your latex paint, it's going to be water, and in your oil-based paints, it's going to be mineral spirits. Those are going to be your solvents that you're going to have in those. And what they do is they keep the binders and pigments in suspension and make it possible to be applied. So the solvents will evaporate and leave a continuous film of pigment and binder. So think of the solvent as kind of the guy in there that's keeping everyone entertained at the party. And if they dip out of the party too early, or maybe it's the guy that brings beer to the party, right? Like everyone's kind of hanging out, just kind of, and then solvent gets in the mix, and brings the beer. It's a party, right? So, yeah, they're keeping them in suspension and making it possible for them to be applied. And then once they've done their job, then they dip out, aka evaporate. Cool. And this is why also when you have an old can of paint and you pop that guy back open, that it's like a really thick paste, and it may be the right pigment, it might even look a little different, the pigment could even be off, but it's not usable. You can't apply it and spread it evenly and get a nice coat like you could when it was brand new. And that will be why, is that your water out of your latex or your mineral spirits out of your oil base has evaporated out of that can, leaving you with just the pigment and the binder in there. You've basically got colored glue at that point. I'm sure that you've probably experienced that if you ever cracked open an old can of paint that was open, maybe a year or two before. How we doing, by the way? Everyone doing awesome? Let me check in on the chats. Okay, quiet in the chats tonight. That's all good. You must all be just very compelled, or I'm just talking to myself. Either way, that's cool, because this is going to be retained and recorded for future watching. So even if you're watching it after the fact, I hope you're getting some good information out of this today. So let's keep rocking. All right, cool. So we talked about solvents. Now we're going to jump into pigments. Pigments are finely ground particles that give paint its color and its opacity, ability to hide the surface it is applied to. Opaque being, if it's 100% opaque, you're not seeing anything through it. If it's, if it has less opacity, then you can see the surface behind it. It's a little bit more see-through, right? So the pigments, that those finely ground particles will determine not just the color, but also that opacity. Beautiful. Binders are also called resins, and the binders glue pigment particles together after the solvents evaporate to form a paint film, and they also glue the paint film to the surface being painted, right? So that's your stickiness. The binder, it's holding it all together there. That's an important part of your paint product. That's a lot of P's. All right, additives. Among other things, additives control the drying time, paint leveling, and mildew growth. Most of these additives evaporate as paint dries. So by varying the amount and types of pigments, binders, solvents, and additives, paint manufacturers can create a large variety of paints And as they substitute lower quality / cost ingredients for higher ones, they can also manipulate their costs and profits. For example, the term pigment is also used to refer to extenders, which are materials such as clay, mica, and silica. That, among their other properties, adds bulk to the paint without significantly adding to its cost. So when you have those type of products in there, they're basically fillers, is the way that I interpret that. So if you've got a paint with high you know content of the clay, mica, and or silica products within that paint, um, just know that it's got probably some more of the filler in there than something that maybe doesn't have those, right? So that's the way that I read that and interpret that passage there. To be able to truly evaluate paint quality, we need to have some understanding of what we expect from our paint and what causes paint film to fall short of our expectation. So ideally, it would stick to anything, have one coat coverage, go on smooth, be tough yet flexible, and would last for decades while never fading, right? That'd be perfect world. Obviously, there's paints that are better and come closer to that, and paints that are worse, but no paint is that perfectly ideal. But knowing that those are what we are looking for in a paint, that helps us to kind of have a basis of how we evaluate these products. So we talked a little bit about sun radiation, UV rays, main enemy of any paint coating. It breaks down the paint pigments and destroys the bond between the pigment particles, as well as weakening the bond of the paint film with the painted surface. So the way that UV does that is it attacks the bonding resins, and then what happens is that our paint film gets brittle and becomes permeable to moisture. Once moisture gets into that substrate, which is underneath the paint, it's going to crack your paint film and eventually peel. I'm sure you've all seen that. And that's that. What leads up to that is that UV damage. To be brittle like that, and then as it just takes a little bit of moisture to start the crack. Higher paint quality is in using those pigments and binders that better resist the damaging effects of sun radiation. So how do we determine that? How do we know? The most often used pigment in paint is titanium dioxide, also called titanium white. This pigment is highly reflective of UV rays and has exceptional hiding qualities. Titanium dioxide is a mineral that occurs naturally in the earth crust. It's mined only in a few locations in the US. It's probably the most expensive pigment in commercial paints. Higher quality paint will contain a higher concentration of it. Lower quality will have higher percentage of lower quality and cheaper price pigments and fillers, such as the clay, silica, or talc. We didn't talk about talc, but clay and silica we did talk about. So those are cheaper. Again, if you have a higher ratio of those and less or no titanium dioxide in the paint, then that we would consider that as a lesser quality product. Higher quality paint will also have a better binder, so it sticks better and better resists wear. The best latex binders are made of acrylic, and best acrylic binders are made from small particles. The smaller the particle, the deeper it can penetrate to the pores of the surface you're painting and just grab a hold of it. So yeah, that kind of makes sense. If you've got larger particles there, they can't quite penetrate in. So if you're painting wood siding, for example, really getting into the pores and the grain of the wood, your smaller particles are just going to do better. Your smaller binder particles are going to do better with that smaller acrylic binders. Right, so that's what you want to look for. Binders are the most expensive ingredient in paint. The paint store, you'll usually find paint labeled either acrylic or vinyl acrylic. Vinyl binder is much cheaper than acrylic, but the more acrylic resin you have in the paint, the better it will hold up and adhere to a surface. So go with the 100% acrylic if you can. Because it's a binder that makes glossy paint glossy, a glossy paint will contain more binder than a flat paint. So just heads up there. Still, a higher quality gloss paint will have more and better quality binders than lower quality gloss paint. Right? All right. Lower quality paint will also tend to have more solvents. Again, the solvent being the water or the mineral. What was it? Mineral spirits. I wanted to make sure I had the correct verbiage there. Solvent all doesn't have to be transported or stored. Just open the faucet and pour. Such paint can, by volume, contain over 70% of water. More water means less solids, and a lower percentage of solids will result in a thinner, dry paint film with lesser hiding and durability. That makes sense. I mean, if you think about it that way, if you've got a can of paint, you've got a gallon of paint, over 70% of it is water that's going to evaporate out. You're left with 30% of a product there. So when you think of it that way, yes, you want paint that's going to have, again, more binder. It's going to have more pigment, less solvent, right? If higher cost ingredients are required to produce higher quality paint, you can conclude that buying the most expensive, not necessarily the case. This gentleman points out in this blog, he's often seen lower quality but well-marketed paint being sold at a higher price than paint with better quality ingredients. So just be cautious there. And how do you determine that? How do you really find out what's in the gallon of paint? Unfortunately, the paint ingredient information is not readily available on a paint can label. So if you really want to know, you have to go searching for it in the paint manufacturer's technical data sheet and material safety data sheet. You can find links to the information online, by the way, for a lot of the big manufacturers of paint. Matter of fact, right here in the blog that I'm pulling this from, he's given some of the common paint manufacturers, Behr, Benjamin Moore, Kelly Moore, Sherwin-Williams, links to their site technical data on their products so that you can look this information up. And, in closing, they put, with the price of paint as such a relatively small percentage of total job costs, let's say you're doing a remodel or something like that, compared to the rest of the work that's going into there, the mechanicals, the framing, the drywall, the cost of the paint is a relatively small percentage of that total job cost. So, from this painter's perspective, to see absolutely no reason why someone would want to use inferior quality materials on a paint job, but it's done all the time. So in closing, I hope you learned something here about what determines, good quality paint versus lower quality paint. And now you kind of have some of that knowledge to know where to go look for that stuff. So if you're considering a painting project and you want to tackle it yourself, or if you just want to buy the paint and then hire out a pro to actually apply it for you, and you want to make sure that they're using good stuff and not using cheap stuff, go buy the paint. Look up the technical data off the website. Make sure that you are getting, that paint that has good pigment and it has a good binder, so that it's going to last for a long time. It's going to look great. It's going to apply great. Because, again, aesthetics, you want it to look great, but you also want it to protect your property. Cool, guys. I'm going to wrap this one up right there. I appreciate you watching. Thank you. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I will see you next week.